Hey there, and welcome back to Utility Sports. Today's video, we are going to be talking about the LA Clippers and if it's possible for them to win an NBA title. And before we get into the video, please subscribe if you do enjoy basketball content, as we do produce quite a bit of NBA content, also a little bit of college basketball and the NBA draft. So make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned. So let's kind of look at the LA Clippers. This year was kind of an interesting year for them. A lot of ups and downs. They dealt with some injuries during the course of the year. Patrick Beverley in and out of the lineup. Serge Ibaka once again in and out of the lineup. A little bit of load management as well for Kawhi and Paul George. So there's a lot going on with this team. They were just trying to, ultimately get that chemistry right. Last year, they really, really struggled when it came to the bubble. They had some heartbreaking losses to the Mavericks. And then we all know what happened in that Denver Nuggets series. They blew a 3-1 lead. They should have been on to the Western Conference Finals, but they ultimately fell to the Denver Nuggets. A really, really tough year last year. Paul George did not want to be in that bubble. Neither did the entire Clipper team. Montrezl Harrell really struggled after losing his grandma, and there was a lot of things that were happening with this team that ultimately held them back. But now we kind of get that fresh slate this year. They, for the most part, play pretty well. If we kind of look at the team holistically, they shot extremely well from three. Multiple guys that shot over 40% beyond the three-point line, which was super impressive. We were not expecting that. They got some interesting contributions from guys like Nicholas Batum, Terrence Mann. There were some unsung heroes on this roster. Amir Coffey even got some pretty good run as well. But overall, this team was fascinating to watch all year long. And, at this point, I'm not surprised to see them fourth in the West. I thought it was very possible that they would finish second in the entire Western Conference, but there were some surprise teams like the Utah Jazz, Phoenix Suns. Obviously, the Nuggets, still played very well down the stretch, even without Jamal Murray. We weren't expecting the LA Lakers to be, this injured. Obviously, LeBron and AD missed some significant time. So there's a lot of factors that played into the seeding. And the Clippers got the first round matchup of the Dallas Mavericks. Now, to start this video, I had said, is it possible for the Clippers to win a championship? Let's kind of look through that. Obviously, if they face off with Dallas, I don't think it's going to be an easy series. I really don't, because Dallas gave the Clippers a lot of fits last year in that first round. They really, really struggled to defend Luka Doncic. There's no way that you can. Let's be completely honest with ourselves. I don't think that you can contain him. Kawhi Leonard, obviously a phenomenal defender, would be your best chance to really shadow him on Luka Doncic. But at the same time, that's who you run your offense through. That's the main initiator. That's the guy who will get you a bucket when you need it. So at the same time, I don't know if you can afford to have him playing both ways in that first round, really draining energy. If you're going for a deep playoff run, that's not going to be sustainable, having him guard the ball handler constantly, fighting through screens in the pick and roll game. I don't think that's where you want Kawhi Leonard defensively. Obviously, when the game's, at the end of the game, you want to trust him one-on-one against their best player. I think that he gives you a really, really good chance at defending Luka in a one-on-one setting. Obviously, there's no stopping Luka. He's going to get his buckets no matter what. So that first round matchup is really tough for them. And I'm not exactly sure if they're going to be able to sweep the Mavericks. I really don't think that's a possibility at all. I think it's going to take 6 or 7 games to beat this team. I think the Mavericks are a phenomenal team in the West. I don't believe people are giving them enough credit. But let's kind of look at the other teams that are in that Western Conference. The Phoenix Suns, the Clippers had a lot of issues with the Phoenix Suns during the course of the year. They're a very, very tough team to beat. Obviously, Chris Paul has been an amazing mentor for that entire roster. Ayton has been playing phenomenally this year. Also, obviously, Devin Booker. There's a lot of guys that you can go through. The Utah Jazz, I do believe, are beatable in this series with the LA Clippers. But, I mean, once again, Rudy Gobert is that X factor in that series, obviously has a tremendous impact on the paint. The nice thing for the Clippers is they're a perimeter-centric team. They're not solely dependent on getting to the lane, but at the same time, it makes it hard when you are so dependent on the three ball. You have to make sure that Batum's making shots. Obviously, Kawhi and Paul George are making their shots. Hopefully, Serge Ibaka, after his injury, can kind of refigure things out. He did not have a lot of time to be able to adjust and get ready for the playoffs. So hopefully, he's hitting his threes as well. Obviously, the Lakers, really, really tough matchup if they do meet them at some point in the playoffs. I think that the Clippers could beat the Lakers. I think that would be a 7-game series. It would be a dogfight. It really would. AD and LeBron versus Kawhi and Paul George. I like the Clippers' depth overall more. I think there is a chance that they do win that series if they do match up once again. Obviously, the Warriors are always a tough team. I do believe the Clippers would beat them. The Blazers as well. They're another tough team in the West, but at the same time, I do trust the Clippers to take care of most of these teams in this Western Conference. Kind of looking at the East a little bit, there's a lot of really tough teams in the East as well. Don't get me wrong. The 76ers would be a tough matchup. They did struggle against the 76ers in the regular season, as well as the Brooklyn Nets, obviously being the big key one that you have to worry about going into the playoffs, right? So let's kind of go under the assumption that it's either the 76ers or it's the Brooklyn Nets going to the finals. And let's say hypothetically that the Clippers are able to sneak into the NBA finals after a long and tough road through that Western Conference. Let's be completely honest with ourselves. It's going to be really energy draining in the first round against the Mavericks. And then beyond that, it's going to be a really, really tough road, a lot of grit and grind. Obviously, I mean, if they match up with the Lakers at any point, that's going to be a really hard series on them. So hypothetically speaking, I do think that the Brooklyn Nets will come out of the Eastern Conference. They have too many shot makers. Their team is too fundamentally sound to not make it. And so let's kind of imagine that situation, the Nets versus the Clippers. I think that the Clippers do have a chance in this series. I don't think they're going to make it at all easy on the Brooklyn Nets. However, they have Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, all guys that can get you buckets at the end of the game. And, if one of them's not on, the other two will pick them up very likely. It's not going to be often that those guys are off in the postseason, but in that situation, you still have two great bucket getters, no matter who is having an off night. So ultimately, that makes it really tough. Obviously, they have Joe Harris too, phenomenal shooter. There's so much to like about this Brooklyn Net team that it's going to be kind of hard to contain them. They have good depth. They have 3-star players, and they just play very well together as a team. So I guess what you're having to bank on in that series is just the ability of the LA Clippers to really stretch you out, shoot a ton of threes. You're going to have to really outscore them ultimately in this series. I mean, it's going to be tough to play defense, right? Because they have 3 elite scoring players in Kyrie, KD, and Harden. So you're going to have to really fight fire with fire. Obviously, you're not going to be able to stop them all. You're going to have to do your best, but obviously the Clippers are going to have to be on from the 3-point line the entire series. I think that's the chance that they would have. Ultimately, I don't think the Clippers will win the NBA Finals. I know a lot of this video has led up to the idea of them possibly winning the finals, but I just don't see it happening. I think that the Brooklyn Nets are going to be too much. Kawhi and Paul George, really, really great players. I think people are, really disrespecting Paul George at this point in his career. He is an absolute stud. He is still a top 10 player in the league. I don't think a lot of people think that anymore, but even in the postseason, I think he's going to turn it on. He's going to show why he is a top 10 player in this league. There's a lot of Paul George slander. People don't like Paul George, but the reality of it is he's a bucket getter. He's a phenomenal scorer. He's an opportunistic defender as well. You have 2 really good wing defenders in Paul George and Kawhi. Paul George does a really nice job getting in those passing lanes. So does Kawhi. So ultimately, they make it really tough on opposing offenses in that sense. So you're going to have to rely on a little bit of length and everything. But also, I would really like to see Paul George in the pick and roll game. I think that's your key to success. Get Kawhi to his spots at certain points in the game, but really run this offense through Paul George. I know there are some people that believe that the ball should always be in Kawhi's hands, but I think Paul George should do a lot of the initiating on these possessions, especially in the postseason. So I think this Clipper team has tremendous potential in the playoffs to go deep. There's not a lot of people that really believe in them anymore, but I still do. I think this team is ready for a deep postseason run, even to the NBA Finals. I don't think they're going to win the finals, but I think it's possible that they do make it out of the West. Thanks so much for tuning in. I do appreciate the support. Leave a like if you did enjoy the video. Also subscribe if you are new and want to see more NBA content. Thanks for tuning in.